Starting off this countdown, we have the Dropa stones. In 1938, archaeologist Dr. Chipote led an expedition near the Bayanhar Mountains in China. That's when they came across some interesting caves. These caves held evidence that ancient life once lived in them. After searching the caves, they found weird discs buried under thick layers of dust. These discs resembled phonograph records. Researchers dated them to be over 10,000 years old. Now, they didn't play music like a typical record, but instead they had hieroglyphics carved into them. When studied, it told a story about a spaceship that crashed into the mountains. Aboard the spaceship were people that called themselves the Dropa. Then later on, the discs were sent to Moscow for further studying. That's when they were placed on this special turntable, and the discs would vibrate or hum in a weird rhythm, as if an electric charge was passing through them. After that, research on the discs stopped. Or some believe research continued and they found/contacted alien life, which they just didn't tell the public. Either way, this is said to be one of the most mysterious artifacts in the world.
Coming in at number 9, we have the menorah of the Second Temple. The English weren't the only ones who would go around taking cool stuff from cool places. I mean, let's be honest. If we go back in time far enough, we will find that every group of people took things from everywhere. Well, the Romans thought that they would take a trip down to Jerusalem to steal the menorah of the Second Temple. They didn't destroy it, but they brought it back to the Temple of Peace. That is a very strange thing to call a place where you keep a bunch of stolen artifacts from foreign places. Like, oh, this is the Temple of Peace? How did you get that menorah? Ruthless bloodshed? Yeah, that seems nice. Well, the Temple of Peace was eventually burnt to the ground, and it's unknown if the menorah of the Second Temple survived this. Really, there's two options here. Either it was destroyed along with the temple, or it was taken to Carthage by a group of people called the Vandals. And guys, remember to hit that like button because it really helps us out. Coming in at number 8, we have the Barber dimes. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when I say the Barber dimes is me walking out with a fresh haircut. You know what I'm saying? But this is actually something much more valuable than me looking really good. The Barber dimes were minted back in 1907 and they used to be very common, but now there's only a few of them left. That's not the part that makes this story so interesting. There is a treasure of missing Barber dimes that could be somewhere in Colorado. 6 massive barrels of Barber dimes were transported through Colorado, and back in 1907 they never showed up to their destination. They could have been stolen, or they could have fallen into the Colorado Black Canyon. If you were to find this stash of dimes today, because of how rare they are and how many there are, they would be worth millions of dollars. So not a bad find. Coming in at number 7, we have Sappho's poems. Sappho is considered one of the greatest minds of ancient Greece, and while there's quite a bit of her work that the world has been able to salvage, it would seem that her poems were lost to the world. I'm not one to dip into poems that often, or really ever, but it would have been so interesting to see what poetry looked like in ancient Greece. Also, so much of the literature and knowledge from that era was written and cataloged by men, so it would be cool to see what that era looked like through the eyes of a woman. I mean, I suspect that it would all be insightful pieces that opened up my mind, but they might have just been love stories or the regular frustrations of typical poetry. I don't know, dude. They were lost and we can't read them. I would hope that one day we find these poems and everyone thinks that they're beautiful and they change the way we interact with each other, but when she wrote them, she thought that they all sucked. That would be very funny. Coming in number 6, we have the Lost Library of the Moscow Tsars. One of the greatest groupings of ancient writings was put together by the Grand Duchy of Moscow. He collected writings from several ancient civilizations, including the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, and it's thought that many others were also housed in this place. The location and contents of this library were always very secret. It became an even bigger secret when Ivan the Terrible was in power. It said that Ivan hid the library so the knowledge would never leak into anyone's hands except his own. Well, we know that Ivan was eventually killed in a revolution, and it's thought that the location of the library was also lost with him. Either that or the people revolting decided to burn the writings, not knowing what they were or how to read them. Or the library could still be somewhere out in Moscow waiting to be discovered. It would be a great find that would open up the world to a priceless collection of literature from a almost forgotten time. Coming in at number 5, we have Blackbeard's treasure. Blackbeard spent 2 long years out at sea as a pirate. Before that, he worked as a privateer and probably thought the money was trash, and that's why he turned to sinking boats and stealing booty. The boat he rode on was the Queen Mary's Revenge, which is was one of the most badass things I have ever heard. But eventually, the law caught up with him and his head was chopped off. But this dude was a little rascal. Before he died, he let everyone know that he had a massive treasure buried somewhere, but he didn't tell anyone where it was. Now, this might have been a pirate's bluff. Something to send out to the world so he would never be forgotten and send a bunch of hopeful men out to sea looking for something that wasn't there. Or maybe he was telling the truth and there's a multi-million-dollar prize hidden away somewhere. Coming in at number 4, we have the BAYEUX Tapestries final panels. Recording history before the printing press was hard. You had to either write everything down by hand or make a super long tapestry like this one. There's no recording it on your phone and then uploading it into the cloud where it will live forever in a file that no one will ever look at. The BAYEUX Tapestries was created when William the Conqueror smashed through England and reshaped Europe forever. People think it took years to make, but the last chunk is missing, so there's no conclusion to the story. To this day, no one knows where these final panels are. That would be like if thousands of years from now, someone dug up the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything was there right up to the point where Thanos grabbed the gauntlet from Stark and then it stopped. You know how much that would suck, dude? Give me the end of the story. I need it. I didn't even know this thing was missing until right now, and I'm already rattled. Coming in at number 3, we have JFK's brain. Here's a very strange one. Someone went out of their way to take the brain of the President of the United States after he was assassinated. No one knows who took his brain or where his brain went. There's a lot of theories about this. Some people think it could have been the FBI or the CIA to cover up that there was a second shooter. Other people think that his brother took his brain as evidence. Some people think that the government hid his brain because it revealed that he was slowly dying from some sickness and they wanted that to be hidden from the public. No matter what the case, it seems like it would be pretty hard to lose track of someone's brain when that someone is the president who was just assassinated by being shot in the head. The brain would be something you would want to hold on to for a very long time. Coming in at number 2, we have the HONJO MASAMUNE. This is the last known sword made by the person believed to be the best sword maker of all time. The sword was made somewhere between 1260 and 1340 and passed down from generation to generation. It probably would have outlasted all of us because the craftsmanship is so exquisite, but after World War II there was an order from the Allies to take all weapons from Japanese people in Japan. This stretched to even historical weapons. Once it passed hands from its last owner to the Allied forces, its location was lost to man. The sword might have been thrown in the ocean, it might have been melted down, it might have been stolen and now is kept somewhere safe. But if you are the greatest sword maker in Japan, then that would put you in the running for the greatest sword maker in the world who has ever made swords ever. So this weapon that now is lost could be the greatest remaining sword on the planet. And coming into the number 1 spot, we have Genghis Khan's grave. Probably one of the most ruthless conquerors of all time, this dude had the largest empire in history. The Mongolians are the only people to beat Russia in a land war in the winter. He spread his seed so much that 1% of the planet has his DNA, and he killed so many people that it actually lowered the temperature of the planet. And if we look back to where he came from, he basically was living in a village of tents. You want to talk about started from the bottom, now you're here? This guy did it bigger than anyone. And to cap all of this off, after he was done, he didn't want to be remembered. He didn't want anyone to pray to him or fear him or use him as a force to control other people. He wouldn't let anyone paint a picture of him when he was alive, so anything we see of him was made after he died. So all these images could be highly inaccurate, and he also hid the location of his grave. Genghis Khan requested that he be buried at an unmarked grave in the heart of the Burken-Kaldon Mountains. Then everyone who was part of the burial was killed so no one would know the location, and it's rumored that horses were released up the hills so no one could follow tracks. Obviously this guy caused more death than anyone else, but this is still something crazy.
Starting off this countdown, we have the stolen artifact of Pompeii. This story has been in the news a lot lately. So after enduring 15 years of bad luck, a Canadian woman returned an artifact that she stole from Pompeii. So this woman, identified as Nicole, apparently stole some mosaic tiles, stones, pieces of plaster, and other little artifacts from the archaeological park of Pompeii during her trip there in 2005. 15 years later, she mailed the artifacts back with a note explaining that she experienced nothing but bad luck after taking the objects. She struggled both financially and physically. In the letter she wrote that she suffered from breast cancer twice. She wanted to put an end to the curse and didn't want her family to suffer from her actions, so she sent the pieces back. In our 9th spot we have the alien. In 2017, a man in Cusco made a pretty terrifying discovery in the southern desert of Peru. The artifact he found looks exactly like a tiny mummified alien head. An X-ray concluded that the skull had very alien-type features. The skull had angled eyelids with shallow eye sockets, 2 nostrils, and a narrow slit-type mouth. Now, whoever was in possession of the skull actually covered it in a type of clay, so that's what you see on the top of it, which makes it appear to look more like an alien. Researchers discovered that it is indeed a real skull, but they don't know what it belonged to. So it may just be that this skull belonged to a real-life alien from space. Moving on to number 8, we have the Wedge of Aiud. Back in 1974, construction workers in Romania were working in a village in Aiud when they came across some pretty weird objects. These objects were buried 30 feet in the sand by a river. 2 of the objects were bones from mastodons, which are very distant relatives of an elephant. I mean, that's cool and all, but the thing that really caught their attention was this mysterious wedged-shaped object that was located by the bones. This object contained 89% aluminum, 6% copper, and a total of 12 elements altogether. Here's the thing. Aluminum was discovered around 1825, yet this wedge lay next to bones that are from 11,000 years ago. The timeline just doesn't add up. The wedge itself is theorized to be around 10,000 years old. People believe that this object couldn't have existed way back then. An aeronautical engineer stated that this object looks exactly like a piece of a landing gear for landing aircrafts. This has left researchers to believe that aliens crashed their craft from space maybe 11,000 years ago. In our 7th spot we have the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is a piece of a stone slab found in 1799. It has a message carved into it written in 3 different types of scripts. You got ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic scripts, and ancient Greek. This stone is the key to decipher Egyptian scripts. In 1814, British scientist Thomas Young started studying the stone and made some progress on cracking it. But it wasn't until 1822 to 1824 that the hieroglyphic code was finally cracked. This was done by French linguist Jean-François Champollion. It's hypothesized that the slab was created in Egypt in 196 BC, but we still don't know who created it. Now, this one is more of a conspiracy, but it's actually thought that the Rosetta Stone was made by aliens, and they delivered it to us from space. Obviously, there's no solid evidence to support this. In fact, archaeologist Paul Wasson believes the Rosetta Stone has lessons to teach us about creating a message that will allow us to communicate with aliens. Because you know, we can't just assume that aliens speak English. In our 6th spot we have the UFO TOOTHWHEEL. This is another artifact that is said to have come from aliens in space. So basically, back in the day, a Russian man was using coal to heat his home when he saw something sticking out of a piece of coal. He reported his findings, and researchers said it looked like a tooth wheel to some device. After tests were run on it, it was discovered that it was composed of 98% aluminum and 2% magnesium. Now remember what I said before? Humans discovered how to first make aluminum in 1825. But the piece of coal this artifact was found in was 300 million years old. So how is that even possible? In fact, the tooth wheel resembles parts that we currently use in microscopes and electronic devices. Again, back in the day, they didn't have any of those devices, so what the heck. Scientists are still running tests on this object to one day figure out who created it and figure out what its original purpose was. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the iron beads. Back in the day, it was found that ancient Egyptians created iron beads. They were carefully hammered into thin sheets, and then they would roll these into tubes. Then they would string them together and make a necklace. While studying them, they found the necklaces were over 5,000 years old. It was also revealed that the beads were made out of pieces from meteorites, and then they would hammer that down. Not only that, but it was revealed that the Egyptians had a more advanced understanding of metalsmithing than we originally thought. Moving on to number 4, we have the valuable meteorite. There's a meteorite out there that is more valuable than gold. It was April 23, 2019, and a weird colorful orb flew across the skies of Costa Rica. It was orange and green in color. This object was about the size of a washing machine. And then, just like that, it broke up into pieces that got scattered between 2 villages. One of the pieces was discovered by a woman named Marcia Campos Munoz. She heard the rumble and saw something crash down on her property. She was one of the few people to find a piece of this meteorite. Now, meteorites show up all the time on Earth, so what's so special about this one? Well, it turns out they belong to a rare class called carbonaceous chondrites. They formed when the solar system was still developing. It's believed that these pieces of meteorites will help us figure out what early solar system life was like. Moving on to number 3, we have the ancient battery. Back in 1936 outside of Baghdad, a weird discovery was made. They discovered a small clay jar with an iron rod hanging in a copper cylinder in it. This was then soldered shut and sealed with asphalt. Upon analyzing it, it was discovered to produce small amounts of electricity. In fact, researchers said it looks like an ancient battery. However, we still don't know who created this and what its purpose was. But many people believe that this was a battery from an alien spacecraft that crashed down on Earth several thousands of years ago. Aliens are said to be very advanced species, so it could be that they figured out batteries and electricity way before humans ever did. Coming in at number 2, we have the alien spacecraft. In 2017, a Hawaiian man with a telescope spotted this weird object leaving the solar system. This object was named Oumuamua, and it's considered the first known interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. Here's the thing. Many people believe that this thing is an alien spacecraft. Let me explain. This thing looks like a space rock, but it's not a comet or asteroid. It's too small and oddly shaped to be an asteroid. The thing is long and shaped like a rocket. No asteroids that we know of are shaped like that. Not only that, but astronomers thought the first space rock to enter our solar system would be a ball of ice and rocks. A comet. But usually there's a cloud of dust and gas surrounding comets, and this object doesn't have that. So then what on earth is it? On top of that, it's said to emit blue colors from it. As a result, rumor has it that it's actually an alien spacecraft. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Hypatia stone. In 2013, a weird stone made its way to Earth from space. This stone has managed to leave scientists baffled. They claim it's unlike any other extraterrestrial rock ever found. In 2015, while analyzing the stone, they found it was not part of a meteorite or comet. So they were puzzled as to where it came from. Researcher Jan Kramer said, and I quote, "The stone's matrix contains a high amount of very specific carbon compounds, called polyaromatic hydrocarbons, or PAH, a major component of interstellar dust, which existed even before our solar system was formed." Meaning, this stone is super old. Like, it was around before the sun and planets had formed. It's mind-blowing, and they still haven't found out all about it.
Coming in number 10, we have the sarcophagus of MENKAURE. The Great Pyramids house some of the most important people of their day. You have to imagine if thousands of people died to build a monument just to put a dead body in, then you'd have to be someone pretty important. I'll be lucky if my ashes get kept in a mayonnaise jar. But in one of the pyramids of Giza was the sarcophagus of MENKAURE. This was found by British explorer Howard Weiss. This should be no surprise, this was back in the 1800s, and we all know how much the English loved to come through and take everything. One of the craziest things about Weiss's excavation of the pyramids was the fact that he used explosives to blast his way inside. This dude clearly had a ton of respect for the architecture. Eventually, this guy's demolition style of getting into a pyramid got him what he wanted. He was face to face with the sarcophagus of MENKAURE. He hauled this thing out and then he slapped it on a boat to send it back to England. Well, on the way back, the boat sank, and since then the treasure has been lost to man. Moving on to number 9, 9, we have the lost treasure of the Lydians. This treasure was found back in the 60s, and it was seen as one of the best archaeological discoveries of its time. It was found in Turkey, and it was said that there were over 300 pieces of golden ware. If you were down there, you could have been balling out of control, wearing all that fancy jewelry and making yourself look like a stud. But you would quickly become overcome with gold sickness. This is the apparent curse that is attached to these treasures. Gold sickness is when someone will start to get ill over time, but also have an affinity to collect gold. It's like an uncontrollable urge to stockpile gold like you're some sort of dragon. You'll slurp up gold faster than Joey Chestnut scarfs down ice cream.
That's so cool.
This curse may have been solidified in 2006. One of the pieces was being returned from America to Turkey, and it was discovered to be a fake. That means someone made a replica and then stole the original. Could this curse have pushed them to make this theft, and now the person is somewhere hoarding large amounts of gold? Maybe this is why CEOs do whatever they can to collect large amounts of wealth they can never spend.
Coming in at number 8, we have the ballista balls. Back in the 1980s, a crew excavated hundreds of Roman ballista balls on the border of Israel and Syria. These were used as cannonballs during the Great Revolt. There were so many of them that one man decided to take 2. I mean, surely they wouldn't notice that 2 were missing, right? And honestly, he was right, no one noticed. But in 2015, the balls were returned to the museum's courtyard along with a note from the thief. The note read, and I quote, "I stole them in July 1995, and since then they have brought me nothing but trouble. Please do not steal antiquities." Use that as a warning, folks.
Coming in at number 7, we have voodoo dolls. I mean, we should know that these are not to be messed with, but for some reason people don't take cursed objects seriously, and they pay the price. A pair of voodoo dolls were stolen from an occult museum in New Orleans. The owner said that they noticed this and they didn't feel any sort of anger because they knew that the person who stole them would feel the fury of the dolls before the sun set on the city. When someone says something as ominous as that, you know that they mean business. She continued to say that the museum was the dolls' home and they will be wicked if they are not returned. Just 2 days later, a man returned with the dolls. Apparently he was missing teeth, missing fingernails, had pus coming out of his gums, and had sores all over his body. And outside of being in an extreme amount of pain, he said that he was haunted by visions of his own death. The museum owner laughed and told him to go to the hospital and gladly took back the dolls.
Moving on, number 6, we have the souvenir. Look, I get it. You go on a vacation somewhere and you want a souvenir or something to remember your trip by. But don't steal. Instead, just go get something from the local gift shop. I mean, that's what gift shops are there for. Now, one place in particular that is a hot spot for thieves is Arizona's Petrified Forest National Park. Over the years, thousands of individuals have stolen petrified forest rocks from there. One woman in particular stole an artifact, and this is what happened to her. She claims, and I quote, "Upon returning home, we first found out that my stepmother had kidney failure. Then our dog died. I had a really close call in having a bad auto accident. Our truck broke down needing major repairs. Our cat died. And last night a gas well blew out a cap, causing us to be evacuated from our home. So please take these pieces back before we have any more bad luck." Man, those objects are extremely cursed. So far, they have had 1,200 antiques returned back to them, all sent with letters saying that they were cursed with bad luck.
Coming in at number 5 is Little Bastard. This is one of the most famous cursed items of all time. This was a car driven by James Dean, and it would end up being his doom. But he didn't steal this cursed vehicle, but there were some people who definitely tried. After the accident that took the life of the famous movie star, the car was taken to a body shop where they started to strip it for parts. One night a group of thieves came in to take off with some parts from this car. Now we don't know if these people targeted the body shop or if they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, one of these thieves tried to strip a part off the engine and the whole thing came crashing down on top of him and killed him. The other 2 men got away swiftly, but that was just one of the many deaths connected to the Porsche 550 Spider.
In our 4th spot, we have King Tut's Cobra staff. So of course you all probably have heard the urban legend surrounding King Tut and his curse. Basically, it said that King Tut's tomb and all the artifacts that were inside are cursed. And this might indeed be true. After the expedition of King Tut's tomb, several men mysteriously died. Well, rumor has it that this happened all because one of the men stole King Tut's Cobra staff. Archaeologist Howard Carter claimed that when they found King Tut's tomb, it was already robbed. But this may have been a cover-up. It's thought that him and his team took a couple of artifacts as souvenirs. prisoners, in particular the COBRA staff. In fact, one of Carter's team members, James Henry Breasted, returned home to find his pet canary eaten by a cobra, and the cobra was still in the cage. Cobra staff goes missing, and a cobra is found in his home. Coincidence? I think not.
Coming in at number 3, we have Timur's body. When you take a dude out of his tomb, is that stealing? I think so. During World War II, Joseph Stalin had the bright idea that he would mess around with some dark magic during a pivotal moment of the war. I don't know if he was a superstitious man, but I think he should have been, because maybe he could have prevented this. Timur was one of the most ruthless conquerors in history. It said that 17 million people died because of this dude. He was at the helm of one of the largest empires in history. On his tomb it said, "He who disturbs me shall unleash an enemy more ruthless than I." And on the day that Stalin dug up Timur, Hitler did his surprise attack on the Soviets. Bad move, Stalin. Sounds like you really dropped the ball on this one. Well, I think that Stalin is a stubborn dude and didn't want to bury him again, but eventually he broke and decided that the curse was real and buried Timur again. And then the Soviets had their first victory against the Germans.
In our second spot, we have the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Back in 2004, an unnamed German man stole an ancient Egyptian artifact displaying hieroglyphic text. A couple of months later, the artifact was sent back to Egypt by the man's son. The man had died, so he couldn't do it himself. Apparently, shortly after returning home from his trip, the man's health randomly started to decline. He got unexplained paralysis and fevers. Shortly after, he developed cancer and died. The man's son believed that his father was subjected to the Pharaoh's curse, and he sent the artifact back in hopes to end it.
And coming in at the number 1 spot is the most evil car in America. The 1964 Dodge 330. This vehicle will go down in history as one of the most horrific four-wheelers to ever meet the blacktop. This thing has a ton of spooky events that have been tied to it. It started off as a police cruiser. You think something that had the purpose of serving up justice would have a noble heart. Well, if you had that opinion about this car, you would be dead wrong. There were 3 officers who had the misfortune of driving the 330, and each one of them would die in a murder suicide. It eventually worked its way into the public, and the first owner said that the car seemed like it was constantly trying to kill her, as the doors would fly open and the steering would jam while she was on the highway. Eventually, a church caught wind of this devil's chariot, and they went to go vandalize it so no one could drive it again. Every last person involved in this mission died. Some of them were decapitated and others were struck by lightning. Eventually the car was stolen and taken to a chop shop, and where it was broken down into parts, and these parts were separated into different corners of the world so this car could never harm anyone again. God damn.